On this episode of Unlocked, we're taking mental wellness one step further into the moments when the stakes are high and all eyes are on you. Executive coach Bianca Rieman reveals how nervous system regulation, presence, and strategic visibility help leaders, especially women, build calm authority and influence when the pressure is highest. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. On this episode of Unlocked, we're taking mental wellness one step further into the moments when the stakes are high and all eyes are on you. My guest is Bianca Rieman, executive coach and former top-ranked Morgan Stanley equity analyst. After years advising CEOs and boards, Bianca discovered something powerful. Technical brilliance isn't what creates influence. Presence, perception, and emotional regulation do. In our conversation, Bianca shares how leaders can steady their nervous system in real time, move from quiet competence to visible strategic leadership, and navigate difficult conversations without losing credibility. So if you're ever walked into a room and felt the pressure rise, this episode is for you. I need to bring this guest on so I can introduce her to you. Bianca, welcome to Unlocked.
Thanks for having me, Madelyn.
Oh, you're so welcome. As I mentioned, she is a former top-ranked equity research analyst at Morgan Stanley. Today, she is a chartered accountant, and I assume chartered accountant is the British phrase for a CPA.
That's right.
An executive coach, trained in advanced communication, psychology, and pranic healing, which she will describe later. Her passion, and this is what I love about Bianca, is helping capable women move from trusted executors to becoming seen as strategic leaders. I'm excited about that one, Bianca. I want to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And I'm super excited about sharing everything that I know to help your audience up level.
Oh, marvelous. Well, recently, Carol Ann Wentworth was on the show. She was my guest, and she talked about mental wellness in our careers. We all know the kind of situation that is nerve-wracking. Today, we're going to take mental wellness one step further. And I can recall moments myself when I had to speak in front of an audience I didn't know, but were critical to the next step in my business. I hadn't done the meditation as I should have done, and it took all my discipline to just step up to the mic. Bianca, you talk about the relationship between the kinds of stressful environments we work in, especially in those moments when the stakes are very high. Can we prepare ourselves beforehand? And I'm going to stretch it and ask within those moments, can we do something to tell our bodies that all will be well, regardless of how it is feeling at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to start with the second part of your question, Madelyn.
All right.
What can we do within those moments when the pressure is already rising and we're in front of maybe an audience, like you said, that you don't know, and you can feel your mouth going dry, you're sweating, your face is going hot, maybe you're blushing or not, you don't know, and all you want to do is just find a hole to hide in. So what you can do in those moments, and if you're not currently driving or operating heavy machinery, I invite you to try this out with me right now. What you can do in these moments is you can actually use your body to reverse engineer a relaxed state. So if you think about it, when you're stressed, your mouth goes dry, you kind of crunching up a little bit, and you just want to go small and hide somewhere. What you can do is very consciously do the opposite with your body. And that will tell your nervous system to calm down. You can try this out with me now. So, what's the opposite of going small? The opposite of going small is going big. So, you can stretch your legs out, move your hips, or move your feet a bit further than hip width apart. Make your shoulders broad, pull them back, make sure that they're away from your ears, lift your chest up a little bit, make your body tall, maybe stretch your spine so that you're growing a few centimeters or maybe an inch or so. And then with your arms, what you're doing with your arms, you're not going to cross them in front of your body. You're going to make them a little bit bigger than your body. So Amy Cuddy, a Harvard researcher, calls this power pose, and you can strategically use this either before or during a stressful situation to tell your body, oh, actually, I'm perfectly capable, and this is just a normal situation. The second thing that you can do is have a sip of water before you step onto that stage or into that meeting, or have a sip of water before you start speaking, because when you're stressed, your mouth goes dry. But if you have a little sip of water and just keep it in your mouth for a while before you start speaking, it will tell your system that you're actually relaxed, because our mouth is usually salivate just before we sit down to have a meal. So we're reverse engineering this really relaxed state by having that water. Don't drink a whole bottle before you go on stage. I've done that before, and then all I thought about when I was on stage was going to the loo. So don't do that. Just a sip of water is enough, because all you want is have that moist mouth. You can also try to keep a little bit of saliva in your mouth if you can. Now, the last bit is we tend to look down when we're scared. And you want to do the opposite just before you go on stage or into that meeting. Look up, because when we look up, that in itself is also calming to the nervous system.
I love these points, Bianca. I've often worked with students, and we didn't have time to go through all the things you mentioned. But one of the things I always had them do was stand there with their arms outstretched, and it automatically pulled this out. And it was amazing how quickly then, of course, they laugh when they do it. And that's part of relaxing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I once coached somebody. So his company had bought a 6-month coaching program. Because he was a very capable salesperson, but he didn't have enough executive presence internally for his skip level boss to see him as senior enough. So his company paid for an executive coaching package. And I shared the tips I just shared with your audience with him. And he was due to present a few days later. And he had no aspiration that he would, inspire or impress anybody. But at the next coaching session, he told me, gosh, my boss was gobsmacked. He couldn't believe it. He saw so much potential in me there and then. And my skip level boss said, who's this guy? He's completely different from how he used to be. And you just mentioned your students laughed. He said, I felt a bit like an arrogant idiot when I did it. But it had the desired effect. So he was showing executive presence just with these few tips that I just shared with you, and one extra tip that we're going to get to. And then he had a 6-month coaching package. He's like, oh, what do we do now? So we spent the rest of our time on, career coaching, health coaching. He started sleeping a lot better, and it was all good. But it doesn't take a lot to show up with more presence.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, tell me about this second thing you're mentioning.
Okay. So the other thing that you can tell yourself when you're on stage is something positive. So what we usually do is we imagine everything that can possibly go wrong, right? And a lot of public speaking advice actually says, be ready for what can go wrong. Create a list of what can go wrong and what you're going to do if this goes wrong, if that goes wrong. And yes, absolutely. I'm not saying don't do that. But what you should also do is have a list of everything that can go right. Have a list of what you want to achieve. Have a list of who you want to be during that presentation, how you want to be perceived by other people, and what you're going to be connecting about with the other people. So with this individual I just told you about, I asked him, how do you want other people to see you? And he said, yeah, I want them to see me as a leader. I want them to see me as somebody they can trust. And that became then his self-talk. So the conscious self-talk that he had about himself as he stepped onto that stage was actually, he used the word badass. He liked that. He's like, I'm a badass investment banker. So he stepped onto the stage telling himself he was a badass, and he embodied that. And that was what his bank liked about leaders. You know, they wanted badass leaders, people who are aggressive, assertive to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked.
And it
So
worked.
the positive self-talk, the visualization of seeing it working the way you want it to work is incredibly powerful. And I've done this with over 300 leaders over the last 8 years, and it works every single time.
Well, it is remarkably logical, because if you constantly tell yourself, now don't do this and don't do this and don't do this, then your brain says, well, what am I supposed to do? But if you say, I'm going to be badass, or I'm going to come on as an elegant professional, the brain says, oh, okay, I know how to do that, and they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what works really well for a lot of women is, I ask them, at court, goes into Jungian archetypes. I ask them at court, who are you currently and who do you want to be? And a lot of women see themselves as the maid, or as sometimes the word prostitute comes up. Like, oh, I do everything for everybody else. I say, who do you want to be? And a lot of women want to show up as the queen. In meetings, they want to hold court as the Queen of Hearts. So we have this experiment, and we say, okay, in the next meeting that you chair, show up as the Queen of Hearts. And then we visualize what that looks like, what it feels like, how they're going to embody that. We put reminders in the environment to remind them of who they want to show up as. And it works. It's absolutely incredible. One of my clients, she actually held a presentation on personal branding for her company. And she asked people to type into the chat, what do you think my personal brand is? And people typed into the chat, she always knows what everybody needs and she gives it to them. Queen of Hearts. She never mentioned the term Queen of Hearts to people, but that's what she emanated, and therefore that's how she started being perceived. So she went from feeling, she told me she felt like the battered wife, because she felt everybody was attacking her, but she wasn't strong enough to leave. And she went from feeling like a battered wife to feeling like the Queen of Hearts. She got promoted. She negotiated a massive salary increase and bought her first house.
Fantastic. Well, I remember the first time that I was named a director. I don't think how old I was. I want to say I was 24, 28, somewhere in there, 20s. Well, I walked into my corner office, which it was. I kept worrying. It was only a matter of time before they figured out I was a phony. It took me several months before I was able to walk into that office in comfort, and then months more to be able to walk into an executive meeting with any sense of control. And I also remember years later pretending that I didn't know the technology so that my colleagues would be forced to speak in plain English instead of Chinese. And what was really funny was that it took them years before they realized I was faking it. How can we move more quickly into the competence we have and to actually show it?
Yes, it's very interesting what you described, Madelyn, because that is, you're pretending to be helpless.
Yeah.
Because you learned that makes people like you. Right? I learned this.
I will clarify, because in this particular case, I was a division chief of the customer service division. So the people that I was working and helping were people who had been abused by all these jargon technical people. So I wanted to model for them. But I agree with you. There are times when we do practice or play at being dumber than we are.
Yes, playing small, and it stops people from showing up with their full potential, right?
Yep.
Okay, so how can we accelerate that process?
Yeah.
Yes. So I actually recently coached somebody who they had been promoted to a sales leader of a region within Europe. So the German-speaking regions and Eastern European regions. And he'd always seen himself as somebody who rolls up his sleeves, he's one of the team, and we do this together. That was his leadership style.
Yeah.
But as a divisional head of sales, with hundreds of people now reporting into him, he was no longer capable of doing that. It was just not an option for him. So we have to evolve. As we rise through the ranks, we have to evolve. But there was this unwillingness to evolve because, hey, I am somebody who rolls up their sleeves. I'm one of the team. So in a way, you could say he was standing in his own way because he was holding on to this old identity, whereas his bosses had seen this potential in him to inspire other people without necessarily being hands-on. And then as we went through the coaching and we did the methods that I've already mentioned to your audience, he realized that he would be able to inspire a lot more people by actually not doing the hands-on, but by inspiring them with stories. So how does that work? You tell a story of some a problem that you had in one of your regional teams and how they overcame that. And that then inspires other regional teams to, first of all, see whether or not they have that problem too, because with sales especially, they don't like seeing problems. They're just so focused on goals.
Yeah.
Right? So he helped them see that they also had that problem. And then they already had the solution as well, or a version of a solution that maybe they might be able to apply in some way or other. And it worked. So the next global sales meeting, which usually he told me was just sitting in a room, thousands of slides, and the only thing you really remember of those sales conventions is the beers that you have with somebody in a pub afterwards. He completely turned it around into a storytelling event, interactive, where everybody felt engaged. And people don't remember the beers anymore. They remember the stories. And even months after that event, people are still talking about it. Yeah. So by letting go of his old identity, embracing his potential, he was able to significantly inspire a lot more people and also improve the company's results. And it felt amazing for him.
I really appreciate the idea of using story. I often have guests on that talk about the use of story in organizational settings, and I just love to hear it once again. As you talked about that one where he was telling a story to inspire them, I suspect that story showed that when they encountered the problem, it was the team that solved it, not him. And so they could see that that was a possibility even for them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. All of us encounter moments when we disagree with others on strategy, on personnel, on approach. Yet walking away doesn't work since you work together every day. I mean, I've been experienced that. Okay, these are particularly challenging when we have the enterprise that may exceed theirs, that we have the expertise that may exceed theirs. How can we think about these moments? What factors should we be thinking about? Oftentimes, I think that women have like to make sure they have all the credentials before they tackle a job. Talk about this issue.
Yes, so difficult conversations, right? How do we go in, make our point, come to a compromise or a solution with the other person, but without damaging the relationship and also without feeling like we haven't really done a good job? So what most people forget about these difficult conversations is that it's really, really important to prepare for them, because most people either avoid them as much as possible and never have them, and that just derails things.
Yeah.
it gets worse and worse, because if you have to have a conversation, it must be because there's a problem, or something needs to change. Or people say, I have to win this, and they fight like a tiger.
Yeah.
And that just damages the relationship. You may have a solution there and then because the other person's completely scared and just gives you everything you want, so you go away. But that's rarely the best solution. So what do you do? And what most people forget is to let go of their emotional garbage before they go into the meeting. Because as long as you go in with your emotional garbage, it stinks. And the other person will smell it. So what does that look like in reality?
Yeah.
What it looks like in reality, especially if you're the type of person who bottles up all of your anger, all of your resentment, and you go in, you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to make this happen and we're going to get on well, is that all this anger, all this resentment, it will come out one way or the other. You will either be very aggressive or perceived to be very aggressive, or the other person it just won't work. You won't be able to build that rapport and this mutual understanding of, hey, we're actually here to find a solution that fits both of us. So what you need to do is you need to let go of that emotional garbage. That is the hardest thing that all conflict management courses, the decent ones, they spend at least a third to half of their time to try and help people let go of their emotional garbage. It's very, very difficult because we have this innate, we have this resistance to letting go of grudges, of anger, resentment. A lot of us we're not even aware that we have this anger. So how do we do that, right? There's fast ways and there's slow ways, but I'm going to share a really fast way. And that is to make the decision and to practice a technique to let go of your grudges against the other person. And what's important to be aware of is that holding anger against somebody is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It actually hurts you more than them. So by letting go of that anger, and people call it forgiveness, you're actually helping yourself more than you're helping the other person, because the other person may not even be aware of the fact that you're holding a grudge or some sort of emotional garbage against them. So a very useful technique that actually comes from the world of pranic healing, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, is the so-called forgiveness technique, where you decide, okay, this person, they have done something, they either have a wrong opinion or they have done something that has hurt me or caused me some sort of inconvenience. They've probably reached their capacity limit, okay? I'm not going to judge anybody for reaching their capacity. I'm not going to judge a baby for pooping in its nappy, right? Because that's what babies do. Now, some grown-ups, in some fields, in certain situations, they may just be the equivalent of the baby pooping their nappy. They have reached their capacity constraint and they can't do any better. So I'm not going to hurt myself by holding a grudge against them. I'm just going to let go of that grudge. And a very useful technique to do is imagine that you see the person in front of you. By the way, you do this when you're on your own. You're not doing this when you're with the person, because that would be really weird. So you do this when you have a quiet moment. You imagine you're looking the person in the eye and just say the person's name, I forgive you, and then the word namaste. Now, the word namaste comes from Sanskrit, which is an ancient language, and it literally means the light in me sees the light in you. So I'm not perfect. I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I let go of my grudges. And you say the person's name, I forgive you, and the word namaste 18 times. It's a formula that breaks the karmic chain between you and the other person. And a very low risk situation that you can try this out on is, say, a domestic partner or somebody you share an apartment with. They do something that slightly annoys you. You can just keep saying the word namaste in your head, and it just clears the air, and you won't feel so annoyed at the other person anymore. So a very interesting story of where this worked for somebody in a corporate environment is there's somebody who had a very toxic boss who's treating everybody really, really badly. It was a nasty boss. And Les, this person who did this technique, he did this technique every day, once per day for 3 months. And after 3 months, literally, the boss was still being nasty to everybody else except for Les. So the boss started being really kind to Les and was still treating everybody else badly. So, Madelyn, what questions do you have about this technique?
Oh, wow. I loved that aspect, Brie. That last line, the boss began treating this person kindly.
Absolutely.
I often talk to people about their intentions. If you step into a relationship, a situation, you have intentions. And even though you may never verbalize them, even to yourself, you may not verbalize them, they're still there and they're impactful. And that's what I'm seeing here, that if you're really committed to letting that go, there that other person reacts to it. I am thrilled about this. I really like it. I also love the example of just a child. I say to people, if a 2-year-old screamed, you wouldn't get upset. It's a 2-year-old. What do you expect from a 2-year-old? And and if you related it back to that word, their capacity. And we oftentimes expect other people to have the same capacity that we have. And that's not always the case. So now those aren't questions. You asked me for questions, and instead I'm reacting. But I'm excited.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the word intention. You mentioned the word intention, and that is exactly the point. When you go into a so-called difficult conversation, your intention would hopefully be a positive one. And the question that you can ask yourself to get clear on your intention is, what is something that we can only do together that neither of us can do separately? So when you go into that difficult conversation, what is something that we can only do together that neither of us can do separately? So you're entering the arena as a team. So your intention is that which you can only do together that neither of us can do separately. And immediately, any kind of confrontation or me against you or us versus them is gone, because hopefully you have been able to answer that question for yourself. What is something that we can only do together that neither of us can do separately? So one of my clients, she worked in supply chain management, and a sales guy was bad-mouthing her team behind her back. And she knew she needed to confront him, but she worked in a very direct culture, and she feared that it would end in a shouting match. So I asked her the question, what's something you can only do together that neither of you can do separately? And she said, make money, right? Obvious answer, make money. So she let go of her grudges with the technique I showed you. She also did some pranic healing as well to neutralize her feelings against this guy and let go of all her emotional garbage. Because her positive intention that she went into that difficult conversation with was, we're going to collaborate better so we both will make more money. That was the positive intention. And she mentioned it in her invitation to the guy at the beginning of the meeting with the guy, and also during the conversation with the guy, whenever she got a sense that he was getting defensive. And it worked, right? He said, yes, I'm sorry that I was bad-mouthing you behind your back. I was feeling emotional. She said, okay, that's fine. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to collaborate better with you so we can make more money. So by taking the air out of his angry sail and by giving, reiterating the positive intention over and over and over again, he started believing her, because there was no anger coming from her. There's no anger coming from you. Nobody will be able to direct the anger at you. That's the beauty of getting rid of your emotional garbage.
As you were talking about this, I was reflecting on some of the language that comes out of religious sects about forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so difficult when I think about it as how that was told to me. Well, you have to forgive them. Well, it's extremely hard. They don't deserve it, is what comes to your mind.
Mm.
I think what you just described is is probably what was originally intended. That lesson was originally intended. Just simply recognize that you're working with a child who doesn't have the capacity that you wish they had, and then all that emotion evaporates.
Yes, absolutely. As long as you hold anger against somebody else, they control you. But imagine there's no anger, no fear, no negative emotions against somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
They have no power over you. That's when you're free. That's when you can be a free thinker. That's when you can lead other people, because you have so much inner, the sense of security within you.
Mm,
It's magnetic to people.
I love that. A sense of security within, from within. Uh, really, as human beings, that's what we seek. We seek safety. We're always looking for safety and comfort. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah, so if you can give that to somebody because
Mm-hmm.
you have it,
Yeah.
then that will be magnetic. That's what happens to a lot of my clients, where then the people who report into their peers ask to report into them, because they give them this sense of security,
Yeah.
of authenticity without being unfiltered.
Yeah.
But it just feels really good to be around them, because they feel good within themselves. And of course, the key to that is getting rid of all of your emotional garbage. So we've already talked about a few things, but there's one methodology that I'd love to share with your audience, Madelyn, that goes a lot deeper.
Please do.
Okay, so that's pranic healing. And the word
Spell
healing,
chronic.
you know,
Spell chronic for our audience.
pranic, yes. So pranic is spelled Pranic.
Thank you.
And it comes from the Sanskrit word prana, which means life force energy. Okay. So when people hear the word healing, especially a lot of people in the corporate space, some of them run a mile. They're like, yeah, that's kind of mystical and I don't like it. I like science. Now, what I like about pranic healing is that it's backed by science, and recent studies here by the Governmental Health Service, the NHS, National Health Service, have shown an 84% clinical effectiveness in pranic psychotherapy and healing for chronic pain after 8 weekly sessions. So 84% effectiveness. Now, drugs that are admitted to the market, their effectiveness is around 18 to 24%. Pranic healing, 8 weekly sessions, complex medical cases. So these were young people with issues in their gut, severe chronic pain, who'd been with the top professors globally here at King's Hospital in London for many, many years. Many of them had had many operations and then associated psychological issues because of the trauma caused by the operations, etc. They're all medication and not getting better. A lot of them are housebound. The family was never able to go out, etc. And 84% of these people, so over 100 people in the clinical trial, were able to come off their medication, all symptom relieved of all physical and psychological symptoms, and starting to live a normal life, where they started going to school. And for some families, it was the first time in like 12 years that they were able to go on holiday as a family.
Wow.
Really life-changing. And I came across pranic healing, first of all, as a client in 2012, where I was very stressed at work. And my acupuncturist at the time was also doing pranic healing, and it was phenomenal. I mean, he was the best acupuncturist I saw. And then in 2018, pranic healing was one of many things I trained in. And then over time, the results were just phenomenal. And I let go of all the other therapies. And now I just have pranic healing in my toolbox together with the executive coaching. It works really well.
Fantastic. Wow. I can see so many places where this can be applied. Uh, I I think every parent should learn about pranic healing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the misconception is that healing powers is something that somebody is born with. And in my early 20s, I dated somebody who was able to, if he looked at a baby that's crying, the baby would stop crying.
Wow.
And I asked him, how do you do that? And he said, I don't know. So, anyways, with pranic healing, it's a very methodology. It follows a methodology. So it's technique and protocol based. You can learn it in a weekend, basic pranic healing. And then there's 4 levels. Each level becomes more powerful. You get faster at it. And it's a step-by-step proven approach. There's a set protocol for every medical or psychological condition. So, but I learned it and I didn't give it much. I did other things. I did hypnotherapy for a while. But then my niece became sick during COVID and she had leukemia and she had to stop her chemotherapy because her immune system went down.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor said, we can't continue for now. Her immune system needs to get better first before we can continue with the chemotherapy. And I remember my sister and her husband, they were devastated because we'd already lost our mom to cancer a few years previously. And after staring at the wall for 3 days and just being angry about how unfair the world was, I remembered, I have this pranic healing book on my bookshelf. I did this course a few years ago. And I thought, there's nothing to lose. I didn't believe that it would work. I didn't believe that I would be able to do it because I still had this thought that, you have to be born with it and you have to be somebody, who's very loving. And, I still saw myself as an accountant and a stockbroker. But anyways, I did the technique as a step-by-step protocol with 20 plus steps where you cleanse the chakras in a very specific way. So chakras are the energy centers in the body, and then re-energize them in a very specific way. And my sister texted me a couple of weeks later saying the doctors can't believe it. They say a miracle has happened. Her immune system is back up and they can continue with the chemotherapy.
Oh, wow.
So I still, Madelyn, but at the time, I still didn't believe that this was the healing. It took me a few more of those kinds of examples before I had convinced myself that this is the future. Anybody can learn this, even somebody as skeptical as me, even analytical people, right? Because at the beginning, I didn't feel anything when I was doing it. I just followed the protocol. The protocol says for 3 breaths, do this for 3 breaths, do this for 5 breaths. Okay, how long is the breath? Anyway, I did it and it worked, and I did it on my own children. So nowadays, when my own children can't sleep at night and they want to cuddle, I give them the cuddle, but I also do the stress and anxiety protocol for them. And within 5 minutes, they are snoring. I don't know how
know this.
many hours I would have had to cuddle them, but within 5 minutes, they're snoring. So the investment into the courses has paid off a million times over. It's definitely worth it. Anybody can learn it. You don't need to have intuition or healing powers. We all have it. We can all do this. There's light in our bodies. Science has found out about it now. There's books you can read about it with the evidence. And it's the best thing ever that's happened in my life.
I'm very excited about this. But I want to let my audience sort of think about this for a bit. And I want to take our conversation in a slightly different direction.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas I think that women in particular struggle with is understanding the perspective of an executive, especially young women. How do you learn it? You have to be there. I remember when I was first promoted to division chief at the World Bank, I asked my boss for one thing and only one thing. I said, I want you to give me exposure so that I could see how the conversation at senior levels was done. Now, it wasn't that I didn't know what needed to be done. I sensed there are other factors in an executive's mind that I had never had exposure to before, being raised to an executive level myself. So this is an incredibly important area for women who have to or want to move up. Talk about this arena and why it's easy to stumble initially.
Yes. So when people first report into senior forums, whether that be a committee or divisional board or the board of a company, there's still often a sense of having to prove yourself.
Mm.
So what happens when they go and present to, say, a board or a senior committee is they go and explain their thinking process in a chronological order with all the detail that has led them to the conclusion. They wait to give their conclusion at the end when everybody else has stopped listening.
Yeah.
So what actually works at executive level is to remind yourself that you are the expert on the topic that you're presenting on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have invited you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're already the expert, there's no need to prove that you're the expert, because by the sheer fact that you have that job title, they will take that. The first thing they want to hear from you is your conclusion. My recommendation is we should invest in A, or we should stop doing B and do A instead.
Mm-hmm.
You give a clear recommendation, and then you give them a few reasons from their perspective of why this is a good idea. Now, if you don't know the individual directors or senior execs that you're presenting to, and you don't know what their personal interests are, you talk in terms of interests for the company. Because at the executive level, their responsibility is to make the best decisions on behalf of the company. I'm not saying they always do, but that is their job, to think as a company director and make the best decisions on behalf of the company. So if you don't know anything else, that's a safe assumption to take. And then present the information, pretend from a company perspective. So pretend that you are a director of this company, what's important for the company. So say a chief risk officer that I once coached, he'd already presented to the board twice about an important security initiative. And they just said, we'll think about it. Thank you, we'll think about it. No questions, no nothing, and nothing ever happened. We then created a very short presentation where he'd present his conclusion, how much it costs, what's the potential risk that it mitigates, and then inviting questions. And he had a very active conversations with execs. He allowed them to ask the questions, which of course, initially it sounds super scary, because what if they ask me something I don't know? But here's the thing, you are the expert.
The expert.
If they ask you something you don't know, it's probably because what they're asking you is way off tangent.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can bring it back to what you know in your answer. And if there's really something that they really want to know, you can always get back to them afterwards.
What I love about, I'm sorry, you were going to finish something? No?
Yeah, so that's basically how you get credibility in senior rooms, by speaking less, inviting questions, and actually having a dialogue. That's how you make people listen.
Yeah. What I loved about that was that you said earlier you need to know, what the, the needs of the business is the company, etc. But you, in a way, yes, you do need to know that so you can prepare yourself. But by asking the question, then it's always couched back to you in the language that the executives understand and what their real peak interest is. It's such a simple technique. And to present the conclusion without all the rationale is so hard for a young person to do. Very, very hard. Because you think, you have to prove, as you said, you have to prove yourself that you're the expert. But in fact, that's why you're there. Oh, marvelous. Wonderful little tip there. Well, before we finish, is there something about this that we haven't considered yet? We have a few minutes.
Yes, absolutely. So there's one other tip that I usually share with people who want to improve their executive presence. And that is to imagine that you are a TV with lots of different channels. So, and the channels are on a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum, you have CNN News. So how are you sending your messages on CNN News? It's very short sentences, very serious. Your body posture is square to the screen, and there's not much mimicry going on. It's mainly your mouth that's moving. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Disney Channel. And Disney Channel is exciting. It's fun. There's a lot of smiling, a lot of enthusiasm. Your voice is is richer, and your gestures, there's more movement in your face and in your body. So those two are two stations at opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, where you are going to send yourself, your authentic self, will depend on the situation that you're encountering. So if you're entering a boardroom, you're probably going to err more towards the CNN News end of the spectrum. Whereas if you're meeting your team for the first time or meeting a new customer, you're probably initially going to be a little bit more Disney Channel.
I love those metaphors. Thank you for that. That gives me a new way to think about how I present myself each time. And I don't have to be the same. Goodness.
Absolutely. So at work, I will send on a different frequency than when I'm at home with my children and they've been naughty. It doesn't mean that I'm being different from how I usually am. It's just that I'm broadcasting on a different channel.
Fabulous. Bianca, this has been so illuminating. I really appreciate your time. And what I love is the clarity of what you have just presented. It makes it, I feel almost like this is going to be easy.
Yeah, it's meant to be easy. Absolutely.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Madelyn.
You are so welcome.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself.
Steady is a decision, and it's the first step to stepping over the gap between knowing and being seen. How many times did you take another course so that you could say that you knew the topic? How many times did you sign up for a course and realize shortly into it that you could teach the topic? How many times did you buy the latest management book to improve your leadership skills, only to discover that you already knew 95% of what the author was talking about? How often have you been told or created how often have you been told or treated in a manner that suggests you just don't fully understand the situation, yet you know you do, as you've met it before and you've solved it? It is not uncommon for others to not fully understand what you bring to the table. I remember a time when the management team were deciding who is going to be RIF'd. Now, RIF, R-I-F, is a reduction in force. It's letting people go. The team had been given a 10% target to reduce the number of staff. Now, I knew who I felt on my staff could be lost, and the productivity of my unit would not be affected adversely. I mean, I had the 4 names in my pocket. So when the name of another member of my team was placed before the management team, I knew I had to defend this person. I knew what I had to say, using the points that others would recognize and value. I knew it had to be delivered without emotion. What did Bianca say? Getting rid of all that garbage? It had to be without emotion. It had to be clear. And it had to come off in a quiet, fierceness. So I presented my case point by point. That person's name was taken off the list of those to be let go. Now, my colleagues came up to me afterwards with a bit of wonder in their eyes. "You presented your case so well, Madelyn." What they didn't say was that they didn't think I had the gumption to do it. My life changed after that. I knew how to manage people, and I knew it. But this was the first time my colleagues, male and female, saw me practice my management philosophy under duress, in public, and against senior management. Suddenly, I was seen. Oh, they knew my division was good. I mean, we always achieved business objectives year after year, but they never saw me in action. If you find yourself always trying to get others to see your competence, it's time to acknowledge your own competences and prepare yourself to be ready to use them in full. And at this point, you're saying, "But you just talked about a situation where you showed it in a high-stress situation." Well, I chose that example because it was clear. You don't need high-stress situations, but you do need situations where there is enough stress that others can see you are working under some stress. Winning a race against weak runners is entirely different from winning a race against even just one runner who kept pace with you until the end. There are two parts to doing this. First, you have to become aware of such situations, and you have to be present when things get a little tough, or you won't have the runner who keeps pace with you. That means that you have to be observing what is going on around you, tracking who does what, and the impacts of their actions. Yes, it will take time to hone this skill, but attention to the situation is really all it takes. Second, you have to prepare yourself internally. And Bianca has just given us all kinds of insights and techniques. I'm just going to add one more. Find a colleague who knows you and your style. Ask him or her to tell you what they see in you that are real strengths and competencies. Tell them that you're not looking for compliments. You're looking to understand better what catches the attention of others who are observing you. Do these well, and you don't have to manufacture something. You just have to see the situation and know that you are prepared to act from your own competencies, and do so. In doing so, others have the opportunity to see you there as well. So if there's a gap between your knowledge and how you are seen, then it's time to prepare yourself internally so that when the opportunity arises, you see it and can decide to act. It's a decision that you are not just ready, but steady. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope this conversation has offered not just new ideas, but a different way of noticing and being able to bring yourself to situations that in the past you might have been terrified. If you're on YouTube, I'm going to ask you to click the like button and subscribe. You know the drill. It's so important to this show, and it's important to others who are trying to find information that is similar to what I give here. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.